The fate of the Philadelphia 76ers season is purely hanging on a thread that some would call Joel Embiid's meniscus. We have a couple updates that I want to break down on the outlook for Embiid, his potential return to the floor, and unfortunately at this point in time, we still don't have the full clarity that I kind of hope to at this point in the game, but still have some stuff to break down, a massive decision that the Sixers are going to have to make. So I'm going to begin by diving into the first couple of tweets of clarity. We know that we've kind of been waiting on the full update, had a video breaking down some of the weirdness in the terminology of the reporting, whether it's a meniscus injury versus meniscus tear. We have a little more detail on what this means, and this starts with a report from Woj on Sunday. Click the wrong one there. Saturday, and here we go from Woj. And I'll begin with the first one that just says, breaking 76er star Joel Embiid, the reigning MVP, will undergo a procedure this week to repair a left meniscus injury, a team official tells ESPN. A recovery timeline is expected after the procedure, but expectation is that he will miss an extended period of time. Woj then quote tweets himself to say that the door isn't closed on an Embiid return this season, sources tell ESPN, but there will be a clearer idea on the timeline once the procedure is completed this week. So the Twitter doctors have been working overtime, and there's been a ton of helpful information coming out about the state of this injury. One of my biggest frustrations with the Philadelphia 76ers organization as a whole is the lack of transparency in a lot of these. I think in many, many situations, this one included, they make themselves and Joel look worse by just not laying out what exactly is happening. Like if these Sixers would directly come out and just say, look, he needs meniscus surgery. We're not sure the timeline yet. It depends on the state of the surgery, and we're not going to know what exactly that is until they get in there. Everyone can accept that, but they kind of take these paths around it that kind of frustrate me. Regardless, I did want to jump into some of the reading between the lines. Here we have Brian Sutterer, an MD. He's cool, kind of Twitter doctor follow that breaks down a lot of stuff. And he quote tweets Shams' report, which is exactly what Woj said on this. It said, this is a terrible way to describe the injury to the public and doesn't help to clarify anything. One, a displaced flap is a tear, not a quote injury, and this coming from Shams reporting that Philadelphia 76ers star Joel Embiid has been diagnosed with a displaced flap of the meniscus in his left knee and is weighing rest/rehab or a procedure. Then Brian continues after acknowledging that a displaced flap is a tear, not an injury, the meniscus is torn. Then he goes on to say, number two, if you tell a sports doc someone has a displaced flap, those are words we often use to describe something that needs surgery. And number three, if rest and rehab is still an option, then they aren't really communicating this in a good way. So once again, my frustrations with the lack of transparency on this exact situation, and the more I read into this and dig into this, and by the way, I would like to point out, did drop an interview with Dr. Kevin Angelis on Pick Swap Media, so you can check that out. That I had a nice in-depth kind of discussing the different potential outlooks. This was before this official announcement that it was the displaced flap, but essentially what I've been able to piece together from my reading, from what was told from me from Dr. Kevin, from what I've seen online, and of course myself being a physical therapy dropout myself, did stick through 3 years of PT school, didn't finish the job, but regardless, do have a baseline for this. But essentially, the displaced flap has come completely apart. The meniscus is kind of this C-shaped thing that's in your knee. It's not the specific ligament, it's more of the cushion, but when it is displaced, that means it ripped off. And essentially what that means is that they have to take it out one way or another. Now, what the true discussion here, and there was another report from Shamsharani saying that I'm told that the hope is that Embiid misses 1 to 2 months. If a full repair is needed in surgery, that's going to be a significantly longer recovery time period. So what the real debate is the doctors know that he needs surgery, that it's not going to just heal itself with rest and recovery as has been previous tactics with Embiid's knee, that they have to go in there and it's either what is called a meniscectomy, which would be cleaning it up and repairing it, or a full meniscus repair, which would be a 4 to 6 month recovery time period. If that is the case, if it is a full repair, that is something that would rule him out for the remainder of the season, and the Sixers season mostly going up in flames. But if it is this just meniscectomy where they can kind of clean things up, that's looking more in the 4 to 8 week range for recovery, which would put him returning just before the playoffs with about a week or two to ramp up and then be ready for the postseason. And that is where these Sixers find themselves in a difficult position. I've been unable to fully lock down when this surgery will occur. It's possible the Sixers do not fully know yet. I have heard a whisper that it's going to be Tuesday morning, so tomorrow morning at the point of recording this, I'm sure we won't officially know that it is going to be the case until after it's completed and we get those alerts from Woj and Shams once again, and then we'll have a more concrete idea of what the game plan is from here. But I do think that it is important to understand where the Sixers are coming from here, that their direction for the remainder of this season is directly dependent on what this surgery is. If this is the meniscectomy and he can come back in the 48-week range, return before playoffs, you're absolutely still trying to win a championship this year. That I think it makes this trade deadline even more important for the Sixers because you have to get this roster some ammunition. That it is crystal clear without Joel Embiid, this is not a team that is just going to hang in there. You have to make sure that you at least stay in that 6th seed to not drop in the play-in and ultimately set yourself up with a first-round matchup with the Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks. That is the worst-case scenario for this team, assuming that Embiid returns. So if that is the case, that further increases my motivation and desire for this team to make a needle-moving transaction. And I did want to point out, shout out my guy running Philly Sixers Galaxy, tweeted this out the other day. I don't know exactly what platform I said this on, but still stand by it for sure. And I said that if there's any chance that Joel Embiid comes back for the postseason run, you do everything in your power to absolutely give this team a chance to win a championship. There's no reason to go all in on every season. There's no reason not to go all in on every season that you have with Joel Embiid, even if he misses most of the rest of the season and returns for the playoffs. You have to put your chips in and not stress about next year. Now, the reason that I say that and the reason that I am so bullheaded on this is we know what Joel Embiid is when he's on the floor, that he's not really a guy that it takes a significant amount of ramp-up time. I get, like, the conditioning is going to be a concern. That has been with Joel when he misses these extended period of times, that I think is unlikely he's going to be ready to clock, 40 minutes in a night the way that the team likely will need him to in the playoffs. He will have to ramp up from that. But from a basketball perspective, the guy's been pretty good about picking up where he's left off. Sure, there's some sloppiness, some missed shots, things like this, but he's still a high-level player and making a ridiculous impact when he's on the floor, regardless of how much time he's missed. Now, I felt before this Joel Embiid injury that this team needs to make a move regardless, that they are close to that championship contending category, but they are not fully in that same mix as the Celtics or the Bucks or the Nuggets or whatever teams you want to throw in that conversation. I think they need a move to make that happen. It's even more crucial to make sure that is the case now that Joel will be missing time. Because essentially, you can check both boxes here. That if you trade for a guy like a DeJounte Murray or DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine now being taken off the books because he elected to have surgery, so no longer an option, but even like a Bojan Bogdanovic, there's plenty of names that you can throw in this mix. DeJounte Murray is the guy that still remains at the top of mind. But if you bring in a DeJounte Murray, that's a guy that increases this team's chances of staying afloat while Embiid's out. That it does provide another legitimate offensive option to change up the look. There's not so much being thrown on Tyrese Maxey's shoulders, and that keeps this win-now piece for when Joel Embiid returns. That I still think, as currently constructed, even a fully healthy Joel Embiid, this team needs another notch of firepower before it can kind of elevate to that conversation. So you can get that piece that does elevate this team, and that player can also help navigate this difficult situation, this at least 1 to 2 month period in which Joel will be away from the team. Now, with all that being said, if they do get in, take care of the surgery, and it looks like there's zero chance that Joel Embiid can return this season, this is where it comes into that cap space plan. The cap space plan that I've had such an issue with and really still disagree with the philosophy of it, whatever I'm trying to say there, that I don't think it's as valuable as Daryl Morey is making it out to be. That I think that there's a world where you can make a better case where it's easier to flip players on tradable contracts like DeJounte Murray's would be. But if that is the case, if Joel Embiid is not coming back, there's no reason to commit and go all in this year. That this is a season where maybe you want to take a step back, see what you got in some of these young guys, give Turk Smith a little more run. Guy knocked down 5 threes and scored 17 points in 9 minutes against the Nets. Maybe you see what those guys can bring with an opportunity. Maybe it is time to absolutely ship off Tobias Harris to maybe the Pistons for a first-round pick, whatever you can get, something like that. Any sort of deals like that to bring the cupboard with as many assets as possible and then really build a contender next year. I get that outlook as well. But if Embiid is coming back, you absolutely still go for it this year. And another note that I wanted to make as we search into this trade deadline conversation, the countdown fully coming, that it will be taking place this Thursday at 3 o'clock, I believe is the final midnight striking for the NBA trade deadline. So the Sixers have to get active beyond that. Another category that is jumping out that this team needs help in is three-point attempts. That when you look at this team as currently constructed, these are the total three-point attempts. The Sixers dead last in the season. They're 27th when you look at three-point attempts per game. Obviously, the Sixers playing fewer games than the teams right around them in this conversation, but I still did want to bring this up, that I understand when you have a team built around Joel Embiid, who's mid-range and pretty post-heavy, more so than most stars and most players across the NBA, you're never going to be leading the pack when it comes to three-point numbers, but there's got to be a balance. That you can't be dead last in that category. And even when you get the pushback of guys saying how the Denver Nuggets just won a championship and weren't in the top numbers for three-point attempts, I do think it's important to have a balance there. And frankly, Denver is able to generate a level of efficient offense when we're talking about the backdoor cuts and the movement that the Sixers just don't quite hit. So while I get the principle, and you're obviously right that they did do that, the proof is in the pudding. The championship ring has been won by playing the way that they do play. Don't think the Sixers have quite the luxury of having the level of passer of Nikola Jokic, who can just create these free layups for a cutting Michael Porter Jr. or Aaron Gordon in the way that occurs on a night-to-night basis. So for the Sixers, I do think near the top of their list, and regardless if Joel Embiid is, I guess it does matter to an extent, but if assuming that this team wants to remain a contender, they're holding out hope that Joel can return to the floor this year, you got to get a three-point gunner. It's got to be a Bojan Bogdanovic, a Buddy Hield, a guy that is ready to put up some volume from beyond the three-point arc, because they really lack that right now. That recent loss to the Brooklyn Nets, they had double the three-point attempts that the Sixers had, and that's even coming on the heels of Terquavion Smith putting up 6 3-point attempts in 9 minutes. And I love that from Turk. It was very cool to see him ball out. That was for sure the highlight of the game. Had a chance to check out that game in person, so it was cool to be in the building, even though it was a disappointing loss there. But the bottom line from all of this, we still have to wait for whatever this news is with Joel Embiid's surgery. The doctors are not going to truly know what they're looking at until they put the big fella under the knife, get a true examination, and then it is on the Sixers to act quick. That one way or another, I do want them hitting the trade block, whether this is to sell off some guys that you could potentially get some draft picks for, stack up the cupboard, get some assets to move forward for next year, or if this is to remain in win-now mode. If there's any hope that Joel Embiid does come back this year, the Sixers should still absolutely be focused on winning a championship. That is how I am feeling. I do want to know if you guys think any differently. If you agree with me, let me know in the comments. Make sure you're smashing subscribe right here on Sixers Digest. We're almost to that 3,000 subscribers mark. Want to make sure we're getting over the edge there. Keep the Sixers Digest family growing. Thank you guys for watching once again. Smash a like on this video, and we'll talk next time right here on Sixers Digest.